This is episode number 64.
This entire class of treatments is like 50 years behind where it should be, right? And part of our mission is to sort of accelerate that back into becoming a reality. And the risk is so much lower, right? We know these things work even before Compass, and now even more so when you see Compass, you see MAPS with MDMA. You know, the clinical validation is there, even not just anecdotally anymore, and sort of legitimate, large phase 2 and even phase 3 studies. And so there's a lot of opportunity in general.
The fifth part of the year in review recording. This was 2021 and an outlook to 2022. 1 hour of inspiring conversations with speakers from previous podcast episodes and business partners of the hosts you will find in this episode. What was hot in 2021 and what do our speakers expect for 2022? As a start into 2022, I will bring the entire recording of about 7.5 hours live in 7 separate episodes. And this here is episode number 5, in which I was talking with Walter Stockinger from Hadean Ventures and Yoni Falkson from Gilgamesh Pharmaceuticals and Podcast Notes. We were talking about the effects of the pandemic on business life, the future of ADCs in oncology, mental health, psychedelic drug development, Gilgamesh Pharmaceutical, Christian Angermayer and Atai Life Science, as well as Podcast Notes. I hope you enjoy the conversation the same way as I did. Enjoy the show. Let's call in the next speaker. It's from Austria, and I hope I remember it right, Sweden, Walter Stockinger, who founded Hadean Ventures. Walter, it's good to see you.
Hello, Christian. Hello, everybody. Astrid, Matthias. Nice to see you again.
Walter, how are you doing?
Excellent. Although I'm not in Sweden, I have to say. Like all of you, I'm in Austria. That's
good. But I think your fund is located in Sweden and Norway, if I remember it right.
That is correct. So our headquarters is in Norway, but we do have also an office in Sweden. But as a team, we're quite spread around Europe. So we have team members in Germany, in France, and in Austria.
Walter, I'm curious in your successes from 2021. What was going on or is still going on in your fund?
Yeah, still going on is actually the right way to say it. So, clearly, it was an exciting year. I think for all of us, lots of things happened that we've never experienced before. On the Hadean side, clearly raising fund number 2 in a very short period of time. We're actually having a first close because we expect the fund still to grow. It has to be on place 1. So we've closed our second fund, the first close of our second fund. The fund size is already higher than fund number 1 was. So quite excited about this. And we already made the first investment, and we're going to make probably 2 more before the end of the year out of fund number 2. So everything is on track. And the team has grown and has become, a really good team now. So it's so much fun working with them. I know you just talked about, being all virtual. I guess that has always been the case in life sciences. So we do invest globally. Often we don't meet the companies we invest into for a long time or very rarely. So nothing new for us. With respect to our partners, business partners, that is something that was expected and hasn't changed much. On the teams, but our Hadean team is really fantastic. And actually, I was listening a little bit into the other conversation. My impression is that actually the junior team members that would need more interaction, personal interaction. I think you earlier said, you're from, the people and the older generation who is used to personal interactions. I think actually it's the other way around. In in teams like ours, the more senior people, they are used to, they know what they're doing, hopefully. The young people, they still need some training. They will benefit more, I think, from personal interactions, from day-to-day coffee machine kind of talk.
I'm curious, Walter, how do you handle the situation with the lockdowns with Hadean Ventures? Do you have your offices open? Is it possible to meet, or is everybody on home office?
Well, we are, as I said earlier, right, we are spread across the continent anyway, so we are used to not meeting each other that frequently. Having said that, my life has changed dramatically. And I should also say, since, our offices are, the actual physical offices are in Norway and in Oslo and in Stockholm, they have a bit of a different lockdown experience as we in Austria do. Less lockdowns in Oslo and definitely fewer in Stockholm. But yeah, there was lots of home office even there. But for me, I'm working out of my home office anyway. What has changed really was that I'm not traveling anymore. I was on the plane at least twice, probably more often than that per week before the lockdown. And I've been traveling, I think, once during the last 12 months. And that is really, really very efficient now.
Do you miss traveling?
Yeah, I've done it for almost 15 years weekly. No, not that much.
Then there's a positive side. I miss it a little bit. I mean, I enjoyed the conferences, to meet also people in real life. I think also in the life science industry, working from the lab or from home and working with people that are in different places all over the world is normal. But what I really loved was at least 2 or 3 times a year meeting at conferences and catching up and seeing people in real life. How do you see that, Walter?
I do like to go and meet you at a coffee shop in Vienna.
We could do that. I think next week.
On a business trip or not. Yeah, I mean, it's a necessity, but we never travel for fun. I think it becomes more apparent now that I do it so much less frequently. It becomes much more apparent how inefficient it is, how much time is spent on getting to the airport, being on a plane, yes, you may be able to work a little bit, read a little bit, do some, have even some leisure time. But I mean, all that time, I'm now sitting in front of my computer and getting my emails done.
That's true. But when I think back to Bettina Ressel, who said health literacy is also important, and she pointed out that walking, I think commuting or traveling, especially with airplanes, had some exercise built in. Or London, for example, the airport. I did always think 6, 7, 8 kilometers when I was traveling overseas.
It's actually even that works better. If I can, you see this in the background here is a stepper.
Cool.
I get to do sport more often now.
Yeah.
I'm not traveling. Yeah.
That's true.
No, I see it. You asked me for the positive things. I really, I know there's lots of suffering and there's lots of personal tragedy and all that, right? But I mean, I can honestly say I'm experiencing it in a very positive way, and I'm lucky. And also our exit was in the context of COVID. I should say, I'm very lucky.
Let's switch the conversation to your investments, the company you are invested. Yeah. What were the biggest successes of your companies in 2021?
I was hoping it's 2020, right? Because
we can also go back to 2020. What was your biggest success in 2020?
Well, clearly, I was now should say so obviously, we were investing in Themis that was sold to Merck in 2020. But we had some very good news in 21 too. Not everything was good, but even the one company where we really did not get the expected result is a second project, and we are discussing offers now for that company. So even there, I can say that things are going fine. We had an oncology company that has very good safety data. We have a company that has an MS drug that also shows very good safety data. So on the clinical side, things are moving again. I think 2020 was a little different when all the clinical trial centers were halted, clinical trials were halted. Lots of delays back then, and we were lucky again that most of our companies were pre-clinical stage in 2019. So everything is moving, and the proof is still in the pudding. Let's see. Lots of critical data is coming out in 22. Safety is good, but efficacy is better. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have some challenges still ahead. What about your other companies?
Okay, so so as I said, in September we had the first close of our second fund, and we have made already one investment, closing one within the next 4 or 5 days, and probably a second one too. Well, which will be the third one then. Those are really, I have to say, look, we're happy with fund number 1, but I think fund number 2 shapes up to be better because the companies we invest into, we're really excited about. The one that I can disclose already is maybe also a sign of the age of the time that we're living in. It was an 87 million euros round. So you can imagine, heavily syndicated, something that didn't happen in Europe until recently. That was an ADC, an antibody drug conjugate deal. I guess, we discussed, we could briefly touch upon the hype around ADCs, but which I think is absolutely justified. So that was our first deal. A company is called Emergence. And then you're making maybe the one that it's an Austrian company, which also makes me always very happy because the board meetings are going to be close by. I'm connecting again with people I met, people I know or have known since my postdoc times in the States. They're sitting on their partner now in another fund who is also investing, and it's in the synthetic biology space, and I'm really excited about this. I think the sky's the limit for this company. I don't want to say the name yet because we haven't signed, and I think the company should first put out the press release about it. But it's very excited about it. I think they have a fantastic technology. We have mapped the global space. It's in the DNA synthesis field. Nothing can do what they can do, time-wise, cost-wise, quality-wise. So and it was really the first time, we try to get, this is a commercial product that you want to sell, right? It's different from a drug development thing that you can basically do from a basement and with service providers. They need to sell product soon. And that means they have to go to the United States right away. Right. So we reached out to a number of US funds, and there was so much traction. I've never seen this before. So, and in fact, most of them said, no, the ticket sizes are too small. Right? So,
yeah, I think the ticket sizes or the round sizes are still larger in the United States than in Europe. Do you get the same impression?
So the ticket sizes in Europe are getting larger. Is that what you just?
They are getting larger, but I think still in the United States, the round sizes and the ticket sizes are still much larger than in Europe.
So I wouldn't dare to just say, the average is now. But in my personal impression, what I'm seeing through my filter, right, is that more frequently in the States you have you put syndicates, so even single funds with very large fund managers with very large funds investing big tickets into early preclinical stage companies. Obviously, they will go entrenched. I have no doubt about that. But you see a 40 million US round for a preclinical asset, something that was unthinkable in Europe until recently. So we were used to, making a round and then hoping that the next round will come together with more investors. There was also a function, I guess, various reasons. One of them is that the funds in Europe are not as big, although I have to say with, LSP's recent fund, they are reaching sizes comparable to what happens in the States. And so we were always also having that financing risk, right, for the next step. So in the States, early stage, but financing it all the way, hopefully, to an exitable stage. Right. While in Europe, we had, a seed round, a Series A round, a Series B round, every time new investors, every time the financing risk. And that is to some extent changing now. As I said, we were just in an 87 million round, and the rounds are getting bigger even here. Yeah.
Walter, I would like to use the opportunity. Astrid, you would like to say something, I guess.
I was just wondering, how can you see that there is actually increased competition for good deals? Is there actually more capital in general in the market now with, all the life science hype around COVID pandemic and whatever?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you said this right. I'm talking specifically and exclusive about life sciences. So
yes, of course.
Yeah, no. But you reminded me, Astrid, right? I'm talking about venture, but obviously, I have not much visibility to the rest of to other technologies and other ecosystems. Sorry, now, Astrid, can you repeat your question?
Because we have heard today also already that, there seems to be more capital floating into the life science sector. And I was wondering if you can also see that with when you screen for deals or when you actually talk to prospective, investments, that it gets more competitive, that you also need to sort of display your edge as a fund or how you could really help them?
Yes, absolutely. There's more money around the table. There are, I think what also happens is that pharmaceutical companies are now realizing that, you don't have to develop everything from the earliest stage yourself. So they're becoming more acquisitive at earlier stages. So, and that is absolutely happening. We have seen both. We have starting to see competition for certain deals in hot spaces, ADC specifically, where the competition was so big that that it was difficult to get in. More importantly and more personally, I took the fact that we did a long due diligence on an asset at the beginning of the year, end of last year, beginning of 21. Long-term due diligence. The company was not able to raise money for a long time, and we looked at the asset and we really liked it. And then, we had a term sheet signed, and then a second party was going to join the term sheet after a real effort from our side to actually raise money and get more people into the deal. And then suddenly, the pharma company stepped in and bought the asset. That was painful because I still think it's a great asset, and they did it. They did the right thing. Would have liked to be part of it. So that's my negative experience. That's the most negative experience of the year 21 for me, losing such a deal to a pharma company.
It's a good problem to have, I guess, because you had other successes also. Walter, do you have a couple of minutes? I would like to use the opportunity to switch the break that we have between the speakers, or to use the break between the speakers to talk about trends in life science. Mm-hmm. I think you experience, if you agree with Matthias and Astrid, that we handle it that way. But I think you have very excellent insight into the life science industry in Europe and the United States. And you already mentioned one trend, ADCs. Can you talk a little bit more about what you believe the potential is of this technology?
Yeah. So to those who don't know what ADCs are, so the history is that obviously, we have chemotherapeutics to treat cancer, and they are limited, and now they are, checkpoint inhibitors, which, facilitate or help your own immune system to attack cancer. Because we knew for a long time that our immune system is relevant for the cancer, and companies have developed antibodies against certain epitopes, targets on cancer cells. There are not that many, frankly, but there are a few. The best known is probably HER2 in certain breast cancers. And Herceptin has been out there for a long time as an antibody that binds to the cell surface of these cancer cells. The problem with antibodies is that they are actually not the prime immune defense, the primary immune defense against cells in our body. They are actually meant to be, if you excuse my teleological argument, they are meant to be targeting foreign invaders like viruses or bacteria, right? To target cells in our body that go awry, that do something they shouldn't do, we actually usually use the cellular immune response, T cells specifically. Not only, and the world is always way more complex than I'm trying, as far as I don't understand everything myself, but I'm trying to paint a simplified picture here. So cancers have been tried, companies have tried and failed, with a few exceptions like Herceptin, to use our antibody immune response or use directly antibodies to target cancer. Herceptin does work, not very well. It does enough to get it approved, enough, to help some patients, but the response is not very good. Now, because, once this thing binds to a cell, to a cancer cell, it doesn't trigger cell death necessarily, right? Now, what people have tried now for a long time is actually to make this antibody into an actual killing machine by linking a toxin to that antibody. And, that this is a feasible way forward has been clear for a long time. The problem is that these toxins, they have to be bound to a linker, and then the linker was released, although it shouldn't be released, by the antibody still in the circulation, or then it was not released, and I'm sure there are 1,000 other problems. So these antibody drug killing, cancer cell killing drug, this conjugate, right, that it just didn't work so well for a long time until CL Genetics really had a breakthrough. And I don't know about all the details, but the breakthrough must be in picking the right toxin and picking the right linker. The antibody was clear. It's the same as Herceptin, right? Which is already approved. Just stick a working toxin that really gets released only inside of the cancer cell, right? If you achieve that, then you've got a drug, and that drug is Kadcyla. It's a little bit better. You would assume it's much better. It's only a little bit better than Herceptin, right? But it's better, right? And now, and from that moment on, people have started to optimize linker and toxin. And I think last year or this year, a drug was approved that is just same target, still the same target, still HER2 as an antibody target, right? But linker improved, toxin improved, and suddenly you have a fantastic response. So it really works much, much better than both Kadcyla, the old antibody drug conjugate, and the antibody alone, Herceptin. So what I want to say here is, like, by improving the linker, the chemistry of the linker, and the type of toxin you optimize around this, and suddenly out of a somewhat working drug, you make a real super drug. And that, I think, because HER2 is not the only target, there's 4, 5, 6 other targets that one could think of for many different cancers. And I think there's really excitement about these new linker technologies and the new toxins. I think this is the most exciting development in oncology that I've seen last year.
I agree with that. I'm pretty amazed what chemists can do today to improve the technology and make it more effective and less dangerous at the same time for patients. And since we're talking about holy grails anyways, I think ADCs also have a holy grail potential. So if chemists get enough money to do what you said, take antibodies that already are approved on the market, link them properly with a novel toxin or with an existing toxin, they have a good chance of making treatments much more effective.
Yeah, I agree. I think it moves to being a game of big pharma because now it's an optimization. I mean, I'm sure somebody will find a new target, but it's good enough to use one of the existing targets that works so. And our investment is in one of those cases where existing antibody drug conjugate is okay, but the new linker, the new toxin, and it looks really, really good at that early stage.
Now it's good to hear that also other areas are moving forward, but let's take a step sideways back to our current problem. I think everybody heard a lot about mRNA vaccines and their potential for treating the actual viral change. What I always was wondering for investors in, for example, BioNTech, Moderna, or Pfizer, was that it for mRNA vaccines, or are there also other is there also other potential in other indications? What do you think, Walter?
Yeah. So mRNA vaccines were not invented for infectious diseases. They were considered, it was in the manufacturing technology, the cold chain, the problem that which is not, that they are very, very unstable, although this is getting better. Those are all problems that people are aware. Also, the other technologies are established and can be, you have the big, manufacturers, they can pump out vaccines at high amounts, but it's still also old vaccines, right? Viral vaccines are difficult to make. So mRNA vaccines originally were made for oncology purposes, for cancer, mostly for cancer indications, and were not a success, neither for Moderna nor for BioNTech. For a long time, these companies, they were created on the promise of what's called neoantigens, right? The cancers have specific cancer and, may have a random mutation that is randomly, possibly random, may stimulate the immune system, and you want to boost the immune system by giving that body, a vaccine that is exactly that mutation, so that even more is made and the immune system can attack the cancer. So it is a personalized approach. So you had to do something where you can easily change the vaccine by changing the sequence of the vaccine. So that's what the mRNA vaccines were made. Cancer therapy, no success so far at all. And then COVID came, right? And they were the fastest among the fastest in approaching that, because it's very easy to change the sequence of an mRNA vaccine. Nothing else changes, right? It becomes a vaccine against something completely different. So great to do something quick. Now, with the rest of the world where vaccines are being used, and this is infectious diseases in general, right? The question is, what are we talking about? There are two big markets. There's the normal vaccination market where we all get vaccinated, like FSME, or like in Austria at least, right? But smallpox or any of those, measles, right? And the question for me is, why would you? Yes, a very large amount of doses are given, but it's a low-cost game, right? Because, it's a preventative therapy. It's a preventative approach. People who take it are healthy. You don't pay much money for healthy people, right? Once they get sick, you pay, right? But so these vaccines that prevent, the standard diseases, they are established. I find it hard to believe that the economics, although I can't do the calculations, but I find it hard to believe that somebody would enter with this space with an mRNA vaccine. Why? It's a genericized business where scale matters and the cost change when you have cold chain involved. I find it. My guess would be no, they're not going down that route. The next is the travel vaccine market, right? And travel vaccines are super small. The problem for travel vaccines is the global market of a travel vaccine is in the, if you got 200 million globally, it's a big travel vaccine. And that's not interesting. And pharmaceutical that sells for 200 million, and then it can't be expensive, right? It can't be an expensive product, so the margins are low. So will they enter travel vaccines? Maybe, because it's easy. Could be. But I don't think this is kind of a blue sky opportunity, right? Where they have a place, probably, I hope there's no vaccine specialist listening, but but I think where they have a place or may have a place is in a flu vaccine that has to be changed every single year, right? So the rapid change of epitopes, that's something you achieve very well with mRNA. Or in the next pandemic, right, where you very quickly need to develop the next vaccine against the next virus.
New viruses will come anyways, I think, as far as I remember, every 3, 4, 5 years, something is happening in this world. And if Pfizer, Moderna, CureVac, BioNTech, and all other companies that are doing research in that field can really bring something quickly to the market, it's a great help, I guess. Walter, we have 2 minutes left. What is your outlook for 2022? Open question.
Open question.
2 minutes.
For me personally, as for our fund, lots of efficacy data coming out. So I'm very excited to. I'm very, very much looking forward to that. It's going to be hopefully good news, but we will see.
When you have good news to share, we can always do a podcast to tell the world what's going on. Walter, thank you very much for your time. I wish you, your team, and your family all the best for 2022, and happy and Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. You too. Bye.
Have a great day. Let's move to the next speaker. We had already colleagues from Shanghai, colleagues from Europe, United Kingdom, and now we are going to the East Coast of the United States with Yoni Falkson joining. Yoni, good to see you again.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. Thanks
for coming online. How is it going for you?
Good. It's exciting times, busy trying to finish out as many things as we can before the year ends. So, all good. Definitely keeping busy.
How is life on the East Coast in the United States these days?
It's great. I actually, we recently moved down to North Carolina. So I used to be up in New York. Mm-hmm. The weather here is warmer, a little bit sunnier. So we're very happy kind of being a little bit further south. Things are probably a little bit less restricted from that perspective as well, where I am now. So it's a little bit better for the kids and just more relaxed kind of atmosphere than being closer to New York. So, it's nice. It's literally 70 degrees Fahrenheit today. So it's quite warm for the middle of December, I think, even for North Carolina, which is lovely. So I'm in a good mood.
You are blessed. I'm in the middle of Europe and we have winter. So it's deep temperatures and it's very cold. Yoni, tell me a little bit more about your company. What are you doing with your company?
Yeah, I think maybe I should give a little background on myself and then the company if that works.
Great.
So I'm currently the COO here at a small preclinical biotech known as Gilgamesh Pharmaceutical, which I'll happy to talk more about. My background, spent a number of years in kind of global pricing market access, spent many years at Regeneron and Pfizer in early commercial development, new product planning. I was the prior co-founder of SpringWorks Therapeutics, which was a spin out from Pfizer. So we took a number of their shelf programs. And now I'm joined in about June to Gilgamesh. While prior to that, I was more of an advisor. So not too new to the company. Also on the side of that, we can, if you want to talk about podcasts, I'm also the founder of Podcast Notes. And so that's actually how we, Christian, we originally connected.
That's right.
So that's the high level of me. I mean, Gilgamesh is, I'm sure many of you are sort of familiar with the popularity of a number of kind of psychedelics focused companies these days. We're coming at it more as a traditional, biotechnology company going at the space, right? So we are only developing novel compounds. We're looking to make, clear improvements with clear composition of matter IP over, the molecules you've probably all heard of by now, psilocybin that Compass is developing and ketamine, DMT type compounds and ibogaine as well, which is potentially very, very valuable for treatment of opioid addiction and other kinds of addiction. So we have a pretty broad and deep portfolio. We're sort of in the late stages of preclinical. We're venture funded. We raised our Series A in April. We're just kicking off our Series B already, basically beginning in January next year to raise additional capital as we go very quickly into the clinic with our first 2 lead programs for next year. So busy times, exciting times, but in a very dynamic space, we'll say, in the public and private markets.
So 3 questions to you, but let's start with the first one. Psychedelics, I think you are operating in mental health, finding solutions for mental health diseases, which especially in the pandemic, I think it's a big issue, and getting relief there definitely helps. In Europe, I heard a lot about Atai Life Sciences. I think they're also in a similar space, and one of the investors is a European, it's Christian Angermayer. Are you in a similar space operating like Atai Life Science, or are there differences? It's just out of interest.
Yeah, no. So I think it's certainly all connected, right? So funnily enough, one of our co-founders, actually both our co-founders, their prior companies were acquired by Atai. So Perception Neuroscience, which was acquired by Atai, which was their R-ketamine, it was our CEO's company before this. And so he's still connected to the company and Christian and all of that. And another company for other founder on the chemistry side called Cures was also acquired by Atai. So there's currently close connections. I think, they're certainly early movers. They have a very broad portfolio, but R-ketamine is a really interesting program. It'll hopefully maybe be less dissociative. It's still an injectable. In general, our thesis and approach is really trying to make improvements and sort of be that next generation of psychedelics. So we're certainly behind them, going public and doing all these sorts of things, but we're growing. And we're also, Atai was built by sort of combining programs in different companies. And our entire portfolio, which is now up to 8 programs, is all internally developed. So it's all novel medicinal chemistry developed within the company. So there's certainly similarities. I think we're looking to be the next generation, right? So our ketamine that we're developing is orally bioavailable, which is in many ways a big improvement for ketamine, which is traditionally used IV. A lot of advantages from. We also believe ours will be non-dissociative at therapeutic levels. So you could see a lot more at-home use, chronic use, experimenting with different treatment paradigms. But, I think they're certainly in the space on the ketamine side. They're going to be a competitor as well. But we have many other programs in different targets within the psychedelic space.
We were talking about, coming to the second question, we were talking about fundraising in this podcast episode today a lot with investors and entrepreneurs from Europe, and also a little bit about similarities and difference with the United States. I'm curious about your Series B. You said that you're in the process of fundraising. What's the goal for you as a US-based company? What are you aiming at with your Series B? How much do you want to raise, and what are the milestones that you want to tackle?
Sure. So I can go into a little bit. So I guess some context, our Series A was 27 million. And we raised about 7 before, so we've raised about 34 million to date. And in the neurospace, trials are big and expensive, right? This isn't rare diseases. So to do what we're looking to accomplish, which is we have 4 lead programs, 2 which are even nominated and moving to the clinic. We're trying to do a lot. So we're pretty capital intensive for what we're trying to accomplish, just because it's a lot of trials, and trials are expensive. So we're looking to raise anywhere from 60 to 75 or higher with Series B. And we really consider this almost a crossover, right? So we would expect, all things go well, we'll raise this, we'll have a very nice long runway. We'll wait for our phase 1B data, which should be in actual patients, which is kind of more clinical validation than just pure safety. And that would likely be a trigger for IPO. And, that could happen in 2 or 3 programs, probably by some point in the second half of 2023, right? So crossover Series B around now, but 18 months later, IPO, if the window is looking good. If not, at least we have raised sufficient capital that we're not, needing to do something we don't want to do. And we continue doing what we need to do and keep progressing the programs. So that's the general gist of it.
That's pretty quick, within 18 months, going public. I believe you are aiming at the Nasdaq, I guess, as a US company.
Sorry?
I guess you're aiming to get listed on the Nasdaq as a US company, so it's quite logical.
Yeah, that would be very, very likely. Yeah, almost definitely Nasdaq would be the goal.
I'm curious again in your valuation, because we had a discussion that the valuations in worldwide due to the pandemic are just skyrocketing because there's so much capital on the market. How do you perceive this valuation discussion in the United States? Do you believe that you saw an impact also in the United States on what's possible to put on the market valuation-wise due to the bailout programs that were brought to the world from all governments globally?
So I'm not a great person to speak to sort of the broader fundraising market, just because prior to, I just came from Regeneron, right? So that was sort of not the world I was living in too recently. But obviously, I'm pretty proud of the Regeneron antibody treatment. And I think it's also confounded by the fact that psychedelics in general is a very hot space. And so COVID or not, there's been a lot of, excitement within biotech and without biotech for funding in these spaces. So, certainly I think valuations are very strong in the psychedelic space. I can't necessarily draw a line from COVID to that. It might likely be through psychedelics, just because there's a lot of passion around the opportunity here and the fact that if you look at mental health treatment, nothing's happened in like 50 years. It's pretty terrible, right? We've not accomplished much as an industry. And to some degree, for political reasons, this entire class of treatments is like 50 years behind where it should be, right? And part of our mission is to sort of accelerate that back into becoming a reality. And the risk is so much lower, right? We know these things work even before Compass, and now even more so when you see Compass, you see MAPS with MDMA. The clinical validation is there, even not just anecdotally anymore, and sort of legitimate, large phase 2 and even phase 3 studies. And so there's a lot of opportunity in general. The risk for sort of totally novel treatments preclinically in neuro, the probability of success are awfully low historically. Whereas in our space, they're much, much higher than sort of historical norms, right? So the opportunity of the size of the populations, the attractiveness of the mechanisms that we know they're sort of clinically validated, and the unmet need is just so enormous that there's massive upside. And I think that's kind of creating this groundswell, as well as just a lot of people's personal experiences with, I think, a lot of these compounds. Christian speaks very openly about that at Atai, right? He speaks a lot about that as well. So I think all those are driving that, probably more so than anything COVID related, to be honest. I think COVID probably delayed some programs that were already in the clinic, just from more of the logistic complexities of trial sites being shut down and all of that I think has worked itself out by now, for the most part, you'd hope. But
no, I think your solutions are needed. I mean, I don't know the situation in the States, but here in Europe, what I hear from colleagues is that mental health issues are rising due to lockdowns and isolation. And but as you said, I mean, there is nothing new on the market, and hopefully your solutions will help to solve that. How do you see the development for mental health issues in the United States, generally speaking, with the lockdowns? Do you see also a change on the market?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's data, and it's all terrible, frankly. Like, it was terrible to begin with, and it's only gotten more depressing. If you just want to think about overdose, I think this past year, it was over 100,000 overdose deaths in the US. Which is unfathomable to think about, right? So especially fentanyl-driven, opioid addiction in particular has been a huge problem. Depression rates are up in all ages. In the U.S., especially on the, at least personally, and sort of what's been going on relative to what I hear in Europe, I think the closures of schools and like aggressive use of masking down to like ages 2 is happening and continues to happen in many places in the US. I think Europe's been a lot more reasonable about, and that's certainly not helped anyone when it comes to sort of mental health issues in the young. So I think depression, there's great stats, like depression is up way higher, drug abuse, which is a function of a lot of these mental health disorders. So whatever happened in Europe, I'm sure it's the same, if not worse, for many parts of the US, unfortunately. And so, the problem is, this is a long road, right? We're not going to be able to be on the market soon, but it's not a problem. It's going to go away or fix itself, unfortunately. And I think that, the treatment paradigm, like try an SSRI and I guess try another SSRI and try another SSRI is like this as great as it gets around here in mental health. And so there's really a big need for different mechanisms, so you can really customize therapy to patients. And, in psychedelics, in many ways they're amazingly useful, but they're also not solo agents, right? There's many reasons to believe that they're supplemental to psychotherapy and can make that more effective. You saw the MAPS data in PTSD, which was spectacular, right? They did cognitive behavioral therapy plus MDMA, and the combined response rates were, amazing, right? Because it just seems logical if you're going to go through CBT, which is a pretty traumatic thing for someone with PTSD, if you have MDMA on board and you're sort of frankly a lot happier and sort of open-minded to things, if you're trying to reintegrate that memory, it's going to make that a much more effective process. It's going to improve compliance in the first place, because that's kind of the problem with PTSD and CBT in the first place, is that compliance is very low, because who wants to re-experience this traumatic thing on purpose, which is basically what you have to do. And so, this whole class of medications, I think, will hopefully lead to a change in just the overall way that we treat mental health, which is not like, oh, I'll just take a pill, call me in 4 to 8 weeks, we'll see if the SSRI is doing anything. Versus, the rapid onset of like, we'll know in a week or a single dose in most cases if you're responding well to treatment, right? So there's tons of big upside to all these classic treatments.
Oh, I think that's very fascinating, topic, mental health, because there are so many unknowns that we still have in sort of diagnosing these. I mean, I recently read somewhere a study where it was that actually 70 or 80% of all mental health can be sort of derived back from imbalances in the microbiome. So again, you wonder, how much the psychotherapy can really help there, or also psychedelics or other approaches, if there are some fundamental things that we still don't understand about mental health that still need to be sort of researched before.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, certainly the second brain concept of the microbiome, I think, is very interesting. I think that seems like a high number. I think it may be connected, but what's causative versus correlative is, I'm not so sure. I don't know that exact study. That seems high. But yeah, look, there's no doubt that the way that we even diagnose mental health disorders is kind of, blunt at best, right? Like, what is, treatment-resistant depression or MDD? The sort of heterogeneity within that is enormous, right? It's sort of, if you think about the level of sophistication compared to oncology, right? It's like saying we're treating depression is like saying we're treating cancer. It's like, I have a cancer drug. It's like, good luck. You'll get response in some people, have no idea why, right? So getting better with predictive biomarkers, trackers of response or relapse, so you can sort of make adjustments to treatment over time. The level of sophistication is not there because the brain is really complicated, right? Basically. But the good news is we know these mechanisms really are very powerful. But what they've not been done, and part of the reason why Gilgamesh exists, is they weren't developed to be mental health treatments. Not really, right? You have these, they were either plant-based or sort of, Shulgin came up with them in a lab, but no one optimized these to be sort of like safe, effective treatments, right? To the treatment duration of like a 6-hour psilocybin experience isn't very practical for many people or many healthcare systems, right? Whereas one of our programs is a similar kind of 2-way serotonin releaser type program, but it's optimized PK for an hour, right? So you go in, you have a 1-hour experience. It's much more cost effective. It's much more convenient. Hopefully that's long enough to really sort of have a true experience and get some of the benefits, right? Some of these, so that's sort of an example of our programs. Some of our programs are non-hallucinogenic, some are hallucinogenic, right? There's a lot of debate as to, do you need that experience? We're not going to just make a guess, because I think everyone else would be guessing. We think sometimes it depends on the patient, depends on the level of severity of their disease. Maybe for their initial onset experience, you need a true psychedelic experience. For maintenance treatment, you can deal with something that's more sub-psychedelic that can be used safely at home, right? And so we're trying to develop a portfolio that kind of check all these boxes and be customized to address the variability within the patient population, right? We're somewhat stuck with known DSM sort of levels for what diagnosis is and regulatory pathways. It doesn't mean we can't come up with biomarkers and flexible treatment paradigms. In the long run, that's what we kind of need to get to, where it's, okay, you did try an SSRI, that didn't work. Try a 2A, try an NMDA. You can mix and match and experiment to see what works with patients much more rapidly, and hopefully, massively increase the response rates, because most patients are not really well treated right now, as we know, and there's certainly side effects to the current treatments.
Sounds to me, from what I hear, that we have a lot of unsolved problems in that field, and it's a nice call to action for investors to support companies like yours or Atai Life Science to come up with solutions and work on solutions for that. I mean, as you mentioned, the data that we see is depressing sometimes, what's going on in this area. Let's switch to another topic, to the last question I have to you. I mean, you mentioned it at the beginning, how we met. It was via your platform, Podcast Notes. What is your goal with that platform?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I guess, my passion project is the way of thinking about it. So we started in 2015, and it was just sort of a, something to play with kind of blog that didn't have much traction and things like that. But that's kind of scratching your own itch, that sort of 4-hour work week kind of concept of, experimenting. I was on the train commuting into Pfizer, and I had time to listen to a lot of podcasts and started taking notes and putting them online, and that's sort of, how things began. Where we are now, where, almost everything that we do is sort of free and without ads and just sort of open to the community. And so I think we've become, to some degree, hopefully kind of a useful service to the podcast world, for useful evergreen notes on topics that are of interest to people, right? So that's kind of, we built like that fundamental base in our sort of user base. That's how we grow between like our newsletter subscriptions and our Twitter followers and things like that. Obviously we have kind of built it into a little bit more of a business these days. And so we have a growing number of premium subscribers that get some additional extra kind of content. And we monetize in a few other ways, but it's because it's fully bootstrapped. I can be very patient, right? This is not a venture funded thing where I'm trying to I don't think this is a venture funded type business, right? Where there's massive upside. It's the sort of thing that, we've had competitors over time, but it's very, very hard to get to any degree of scale or profitability. And almost everyone gives up like years before that happened. And so that's our moat, I suppose, is just like grit. But, to me, it's like, I want to keep doing what we're doing. Part of the value is we kind of curate what we think are the most interesting podcasts. We take notes, we share those out, and we keep doing that. And we'll grow our sort of subscriber set and kind of a few other things. But, I just want to keep on growing it slowly. There's no big master plan besides kind of keep on doing what we're doing and hopefully providing some useful things. And, I personally enjoy having like this massive archive of notes on podcasts that I personally think are interesting. It's a very useful kind of tool, right? To the idea of just sort of, scratching your own itch with a company. They don't all have to be venture level potential to be worthwhile. And so that's kind of what I've been focused on. Here you are on mute.
Yeah, you have built a nice platform, I think. The reason why I reached out to you was the success you created with my podcast. When Phagomed did a deal with BioNTech, I didn't expect much impact on the podcast. I had an interview with the founders of Phagomed last year, and they're in phage therapies, and basically it was not very famous until they closed the deal. And since then, I had an uptake in downloads, and I was curious where this is coming from. So I did several things, some things myself, like implementing a new content marketing strategy. Then also I thought, okay, when Phagomed is making a deal, of course, a little bit of download improvement should be visible, but I didn't expect huge impact. So now we have, I think, about 10x, so 10 times the download numbers I had 2 months or 3 months ago. And I started using Google and trying to find out where is this coming from. And I saw a lot of traction from the United States. And one factor I found was your podcast notes, and that you highlighted and featured the Phagomed episode. Can you tell me a little bit more what your reasons is that you are doing that you're just picking up podcasts and highlights them in a way that you present it to a community that you really have an impact?
Yeah, no, it was, a little bit luck, I guess, as it always is. I think I came across a tweet about your podcast. I'm not sure exactly where that came from, but and it struck me as interesting. And so sort of we worked up notes to it. Personally, the reason why I was interested is because, as much as we talk about antivirals and viruses have taken over the whole world, it's all anyone talks about. Personally, in the long run, I think we don't talk enough nearly about, antibiotics, anti-infectives in that space. Was something that, I was, pushing Pfizer to get back into back when I was there in around 2015, because I kind of considered it sort of like base level. Like, we don't have basic level anti-infectives. Like, your oncology portfolio is dead too, guys, because if we can't immunocompromise people and protect them with antibiotics, you can't give them oncology drugs. But so it's sort of been like a pet issue of interest of mine for many years. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, let's go take notes on it. And one of our writers is, very knowledgeable and has, a master's degree in biology, and she's, best sort of situated for these kinds of podcasts. And so that's kind of why, I saw it and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. let's take notes on it. And I think that the upside is if you look across our, 24,000 newsletter subscriptions and our Twitter followers and our just sort of daily traffic, we also have a playlist. So every time we take notes on a podcast, it gets automatically added to sort of like a master playlist of what we take notes on, right? And so we have subscribers to that, and it's impossible for me to track, but in many different places between Android and Apple Podcasts and Overcast and whatever. And so that's going to trigger listens directly. There are plays on our website. So anyone's who's looking at the page, you can play and listen directly there too. So between people being driven by Google and by Twitter and by the newsletter and the RSS feed for the podcast playlist, all those kind of come together to being pretty significant for most podcasters, unless you're sort of in the upper tiers where, Joe Rogan doesn't care. He's not going to notice, when I take notes on something that we do, but 99% of podcasters aren't there. And so I think that's what most likely drove kind of your spike. And I think it's something we've seen with other podcasts that we've taken notes on when we take notes on lesser known podcasts, often, people feel like, thank you. Where did that come from? That was kind of exciting. What kind of drove the spike. So I think you did some good detective work. And so, humbly, I'm pretty sure most of that was kind of podcast notes driven, I would think.
Can you give us a little bit background to your community? What's in your community? Who are the listeners?
Yeah, so I'd say it's majority male, probably 65-35 male, anywhere from 18 to 35, right? So I don't have great data, to be honest, but I mean, there's certainly relatively higher levels of income involved in or interested in tech. There's we do a lot of content on technology, startups, entrepreneurship, increasingly crypto. So there's a lot of, there's a kind of growing part of our community on the crypto side of things. Twitter is definitely our biggest sort of, if you think about Twitter in general as a medium and who starts to aggregate there, that's by far sort of our main location, right? So there's people that are kind of lifelong learners, people interested in improving their health, creating side gigs, side hustles, interested in joining startups or about venture capital. Those are kind of the major topics that we focus on. So it sort of attracts people either working in those areas or interested in them at the very least. So that's kind of our community.
No,
but it's not as much as I wish it would be. Apologies for the dog. It's not that we don't have an active community where everyone's kind of talking all the time, because as a basic function, what we're doing is we're trying to save people time. So you don't have to listen to 10 podcasts they don't have time for, and they can find what's most useful. And we're sort of an efficiency benefit, right? Which means you're not going to then go spend an hour talking on a Slack channel with other people. Because part of the point is to actually save time and spend less time listening to the podcast, but getting a lot of the learning from it. So as much as I wish we did, we don't have an active engaged Discord or something like that on the community side of things.
No, it would be great to stay in touch, because I think it's a great opportunity to link Europe with the United States via your tool. And let's see how to evolve that in future. Yoni, I have one final question to you. We have 4 minutes left until the next speakers are coming. What's your outlook for 2022? Your personal outlook, open question.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm probably overly optimistic that things will just go a little bit more back to normal, but it's probably just wishful thinking, unfortunately. That's sort of the background of everything is what about all the COVID stuff, right? So, we try to keep things as normal as we can for the kids. And I hope that, I think there's a lot of hysteria and a lot of, misinformation and miscommunication coming from our governmental areas actually is more my bigger concern, not the others where they call it misinformation. I think there's a lot of dishonesty going on. And I hope that people sort of start to calm down and try to move back to reality and understanding that we have an endemic disease and we're going to have to live with it. And it doesn't really matter what vaccine passes insanity that you're trying to do. So maybe that's too political, but I kind of hope all that stuff goes back a bit more to normal, because I don't think it's helpful. On the business side, I still spend the large majority of time is focused on Gilgamesh. I think we'll hopefully have a very successful Series A coming up, and that will give us the runway and the capital we need to be really aggressive in developing our programs and growing the team and all those good things, which is very, very exciting. We're a fully remote kind of company, so we're sort of built for COVID. But It doesn't mean we don't like to meet up in person sometimes. So travel restrictions, things like that, put a hamper on things. But that's kind of my focus. And Podcast Notes is really just kind of continue to grind it out and grow what we do and keep it running. But that's the 3 parts of my answer.
Thank you very much for joining our recording today, our session today. I wish you, your team, and your family all the best for 2022 and have a happy and Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, Christian.
Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast and make sure you've subscribed. Have a great day.